I still remember the exact moment my world tilted sideways, not dramatically, not with a crash, but with the soft click of a door opening, and a voice I had never heard before calling my husband sweetheart. It was a Saturday in late October, and the leaves outside our home in Charlotte, North Carolina were doing that thing they do every fall, turning gold and amber, like the world was putting on its most beautiful show, right before everything went cold. My best friend Danielle had decorated our living room with pale yellow streamers, and little paper stars hanging from the ceiling fan. There were cupcakes on the kitchen table, a banner above the fireplace that read, "Almost here," and about 14 women I loved most in the world, sitting in folding chairs arranged in a wide semicircle. It was my baby shower. My safe place, my celebration. My name is Hannah Reeves. I was 26 years old that October, married for 2 years to a man named Caleb, and 7 months pregnant with our first child, a boy we had already named Eli. I had spent months building this life carefully, the way you build something you believe in. I had a good job as a dental hygienist at a clinic near uptown Charlotte. We had a house with a yellow front door. We had a nursery painted sage green, with a wooden name sign that Caleb's mother had made by hand. Everything felt solid, everything felt real. And then the door opened. At first I thought it was a late guest. My aunt had texted that she might be running behind, and I assumed it was her when I heard the front door. I was sitting in the center of the room, a soft blanket draped over my lap, a half-eaten cupcake on the table beside me. I looked up with a smile ready, but it wasn't my aunt. Standing in the doorway of my living room was a woman I had never seen before in my life. She was maybe 24 or 25, with long dark hair pulled back into a low ponytail. She was wearing a floral wrap dress, and she was visibly pregnant, maybe 5 or 6 months along. She looked around the room slowly, taking it all in, and then her eyes landed on Caleb. Caleb had been standing near the kitchen doorway with a plate of food, talking quietly to my father-in-law. The moment this woman's eyes found him, her whole face changed. And then she said it loud enough for everyone to hear, calm and clear as a bell. "Sweetheart, I've been trying to reach you all morning." The room went silent, the way rooms only go silent when something has gone very, very wrong. I watched 14 women freeze simultaneously. I watched Caleb's face drain of color. I watched the cupcake plate tilt slightly in his hand before he caught it. I did not move. I did not breathe. I just sat there with my hand on my belly where Eli was kicking, thinking, this is not happening. This cannot be happening. But it was. The woman stepped fully inside. She looked at me, then really looked at me, and I saw something cross her face that I could not immediately name. It was not guilt. It was not embarrassment. It was something more calculated than either of those things. And then she spoke again, this time to the room. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said. And her voice was steady, practiced almost. "I know this is a party, but I need to speak with my husband." My mother made a sound like a sharp intake of breath. Danielle stood up from her chair. My mother-in-law, Sandra, went very still in the corner of the room, and I just kept my hand on my belly and looked at this woman and waited, because some part of me knew that whatever came next was going to change everything, and the only thing I could control right now was how I responded. "I don't know who you are," I said, and my voice came out quieter and steadier than I expected, "but you just walked into my home." She looked at me with what I can only describe as pity. The kind of pity that isn't really pity at all, it's performance. It's the face someone makes when they want you to feel small. "I know this must be confusing," she said, "and I'm truly sorry for that, but Caleb and I have been together for over a year. This baby," she put a hand on her stomach, "is his. We were going to tell you together, but he's been avoiding my calls and I couldn't wait anymore." I heard someone in the room say, "Oh my God." I heard a chair scrape against the floor. I heard Danielle say my name, soft and careful, like she was talking someone down from a ledge. But I was not on a ledge. I was sitting in my own living room, at my own baby shower, carrying my own child, and something inside me had gone very quiet and very focused, the way it does sometimes when the situation is so surreal that your brain just shifts into a different gear entirely. I looked at Caleb. He had set the plate down. His face was white as paper. He was shaking his head slowly, opening his mouth, closing it again. He looked like a man who had just watched a car accident happen in slow motion, and could not believe it was real. "Hannah," he finally said. I don't know this woman. I have never." "He's lying," the woman said, cutting him off smoothly. "Ask him about the hotel in Raleigh. Ask him about November of last year." And there it was, a detail, something specific, something that made 3 or 4 of the women in the room shift in their seats and glance at me with that awful, helpless look people give you when they don't know whose side to take, but the story is starting to sound believable. I could feel the room tilting toward her. I could feel the doubt creeping in around the edges, not in me, but in the people I loved, in the women who were supposed to be celebrating me today. And that was the thing that made me angry. Not the accusation itself, not the performance of it, but the way she was doing it here, in this room, on this day, in front of everyone I cared about. She had chosen this moment on purpose. She wanted an audience. She wanted witnesses to my humiliation. So I asked my one question. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I simply looked at her calmly and directly and said, "What is Caleb's middle name?" The room went completely still. She blinked. Just once, quickly, and then she smiled, but the smile didn't quite reach her eyes the way it had a second ago. What does that have to do with his middle name?" I said again. "If he's your husband, if you've been together for over a year, what is his middle name?" She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. And in that silence, everything changed. My mother-in-law Sandra stood up from her chair in the corner. Her voice when she spoke was low and controlled and absolutely devastating. "His middle name is Thomas," she said, "after his grandfather. And I have never seen you before in my life." I watched the color leave the woman's face. I watched her composure, that carefully constructed, practiced composure, begin to crack at the edges. Her eyes moved around the room, looking for purchase, looking for someone who might still be on her side, and finding none. My father-in-law stepped forward from the kitchen doorway. "I think you need to leave," he said quietly. "Right now." But before she could move, my Danielle, who has been my best friend since 7th grade and who is approximately 5 feet 2 inches of pure protective fury, was already at the door. "I'm going to need you to go," she said. "And I'm going to need you to not come back." The woman stood there for another moment, her hands still on her stomach, her eyes still moving. And then something seemed to collapse inside her. The performance fell away, and what was left underneath was something that looked, strangely, like desperation. Not malice. Desperation. And as angry as I was, as completely thoroughly bone-deep angry as I was, I registered that. I filed it away. She left without another word. The door clicked shut behind her. For a moment, nobody in the room spoke. Then my mother crossed the room and sat beside me and took my hand, and I felt Eli kick again, hard, like he was reminding me that he was still there, that we were still here, that the world had not actually ended. "Are you okay?" my mother whispered. "I'm okay," I said, and I meant it. Not in the way people say it when they're not okay. I meant it in the quiet, clear way that comes after something frightening passes, and you realize you're still standing. I looked at Caleb. He was still by the kitchen doorway, and his eyes were wet, and he looked like a man who had just watched someone try to burn down his house, and could not fully believe it had happened. "I don't know her," he said again, and this time his voice broke on the words. "Hannah, I swear to you, I have never seen that woman before today." I believed him, not because I was naive, not because I didn't understand that marriages can hide things. I believed him because I knew Caleb, the real Caleb, the one who still left notes in my lunch bag, and who had cried when we heard Eli's heartbeat for the first time, and who had learned to make my grandmother's chicken soup from scratch when I was sick in my first trimester. I knew him. And the man standing in front of me, shaking and pale and looking at me like I was the only steady thing in the room, was not a man hiding an affair. He was a man who had just been blindsided. But knowing it and understanding it were two different things, and there were still 14 women in my living room who had just witnessed all of this. I squeezed my mother's hand, and then I stood up slowly, because 7 months pregnant and sudden standing don't mix well, and I looked around at my friends, my family, the women who had come to celebrate me today. "I'm sorry you all had to see that," I said. "I don't know who she was or what that was about, but I know who my husband is, and I know that today is about Eli." I put my hand on my stomach. "So if everyone is okay with it, I'd very much like to keep celebrating my son." There was a beat of silence, and then my Aunt Maureen started to clap, and then everyone was clapping, and Danielle was laughing through tears, and my mother-in-law Sandra crossed the room and hugged me so hard I could barely breathe. That moment right there is the one I go back to when I need to remember what it feels like to be truly held by the people who love you. The party continued. We played games, we ate more cupcakes, we opened gifts. And underneath all of it was a hum of something that wasn't quite normal, the kind of energy a room holds after something shocking has passed through it. But we were all determined to rise above it, and so we did. After the guests had gone home and Danielle had helped me clean up and my parents had said their long, worried goodbyes, Caleb and I sat on the couch in our quiet living room surrounded by gifts and streamers and the lingering scent of cupcakes. He told me everything he knew, which was essentially nothing. He had no idea who she was, had no connection to her that he could identify, could not explain why she had come into our home and said what she said. We talked for a long time that night, not fighting, talking. The way you talk when something has shaken the ground under your feet, and you need to make sure the foundation is still solid. We talked about trust and about fear, and about the fact that Eli was coming in 8 weeks and that whatever this was, we were going to face it together. 2 days later, we found out who she was. Her name, we eventually pieced together through a series of conversations with people we trusted, was Megan Calloway. She was 24 years old, and she did live in the Charlotte area about 40 minutes away, in a suburb called Cornelius. And the man she was actually involved with, the father of her baby, the one who had been avoiding her calls, was not Caleb Reeves, the dental office manager from Charlotte. It was a different Caleb Reeves, a man who lived in Raleigh, worked in finance, and had apparently given Megan a false last name when they first met, or possibly a false first name. The details were murky, and the combination of partial information and panic had led her, somehow, to the wrong address, the wrong party, the wrong husband. I know how that sounds. I know how wildly improbable it is. But the world is full of wildly improbable things, and sometimes the explanation for something that looks like destruction is simply that someone was desperate and frightened, and made a series of terrible decisions fueled by that fear. I did not forgive her immediately. I want to be honest about that. For weeks after the shower, I was angry in a way that lived in my body, a low, constant heat behind my sternum that flared up at odd moments. I would be washing a dish or folding a tiny onesie for Eli's drawer, and suddenly the memory of her standing in my living room calling my husband sweetheart would hit me like a wave, and I would have to stop what I was doing and breathe through it. I talked to my therapist about it. I talked to Danielle about it. I talked to Caleb about it more nights than I can count. And slowly, the anger began to shift into something more complicated, something that included, around the edges, a kind of sorrow for her. Not an excuse for what she did, not a pardon of it, but a recognition that she had been in a desperate, frightened place, and that desperation had made her do something that hurt me in a way I had not expected to be hurt. Eli was born on December 19th, 6 days before Christmas, at 2:47 in the morning. He was 7 pounds and 4 ounces, and he had Caleb's nose and my eyes and a cry that filled the entire delivery room like a declaration. The moment they placed him on my chest, I felt something shift inside me that I don't have words for, a tectonic kind of shift, like something fundamental about the structure of the world had rearranged itself. Caleb was beside me, his forehead pressed against my temple, his hand wrapped around mine, crying in a way I had never seen him cry before, openly and completely, without any self-consciousness at all. "Hey Eli," he whispered, "we've been waiting for you." I have thought a lot, in the months since that October baby shower, about what it means to know someone, to really know them, not just their middle name though that mattered. That one simple question mattered more than I could have predicted, but their character, the texture of who they are, the way they show up when things go wrong. What I know is this: Caleb Thomas Reeves is a good man, not a perfect man. No one is a perfect man, but a good one, the kind who shows up, the kind who stays. And when a stranger walked into our home and tried, whether intentionally or out of panic desperation, to unravel what we had built, what saved us was not drama or confrontation, or a spectacular moment of revenge. What saved us was the simple, accumulated truth of who we were to each other. I did not need to raise my voice. I did not need to cry. I just needed to ask one question. Because the truth, when it's real, doesn't need defending. It just needs space to reveal itself. I think about Megan Calloway sometimes. I don't know what happened with her, and her Caleb, the real one, the one in Raleigh who had been avoiding her calls. I hope she's okay. I hope her baby is healthy and loved. I hope she found whatever solid ground she was looking for when she walked into my living room that day, looking like a woman who had run out of options. But mostly I think about my son, sleeping in his sage green nursery under the wooden name sign his grandmother made. I think about the yellow front door of our house, and the way Charlotte looks in the fall, all gold and amber and briefly, heartbreakingly beautiful before the cold comes in. I think about how quickly everything can feel like it's falling apart, and how quickly it can feel solid again, if you've built it right. My name is Hannah Reeves. I am 27 years old now, and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I have a son named Eli Thomas, who smells like lavender soap and makes a sound like a question mark when he's waking up from a nap. I have a husband who knows my grandmother's chicken soup recipe. I have a best friend who will stand at a door and ask you to leave with the calm authority of someone who has absolutely nothing to prove. And I have a memory of a room full of women who chose, in the middle of something frightening, to keep celebrating. That is what I hold on to. That is the thing that stays. Because when someone walks into your life and tries to make you doubt everything you know to be true, the answer is never panic. The answer is never cruelty. The answer is a steady voice, a direct question, and the quiet, unshakable confidence that comes from really knowing who you are and what you've built. She went pale when she couldn't answer, and I just kept on celebrating my son.